So on Wednesday night, Kamala Harris had her disastrous interview with Bret Baier.
Yes, she did.
I want to get your opinion on it in a second, but first I want to play a clip of how it began. And right from the beginning, you can see that she's immediately flustered because she's not used to doing interviews with people who are hostile toward her. So here's that clip.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you,
now,
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a
an
rough
immigration
estimate of
system
6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question. I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
Unbelievable. And, we have a broken immigration system that needs to be fixed. It's like a constant talking point.
He asks a very specific question, and he goes about saying that their estimates from her administration is that about 6 million illegal aliens have been let into this country. And he asks her, how many do you say have been let into the country? And she's like, let me be clear. Let's get this straight. And she doesn't even answer the question.
No, let me be clear.
Yeah, she runs away from it.
I was born a poor black child.
Yeah, in a middle-class family.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has no response to it.
No.
And then she goes on to reference a bill that when she and President Biden were signed in hours after they were signed in, she says they posited this bill to be signed by Congress. And Bret Baier names it in the interview. It's called the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. And I read the summary of the bill, and here are 4 things that I noticed from this bill. So number 1, it replaced the term alien with non-citizen. Number 2, it established a new status named lawful prospective immigrant for people who are continually present in the U.S. from January 1st, 2021. 3, it provided permanent resident status to aliens who entered the U.S. with a minor, among other qualifications. And 4, it established refugee processing centers in Central America. So that doesn't seem to solve the problem to me.
No, it doesn't solve the problem. Not only that, it's like nobody brings that up.
Right.
I mean, we did a show on the processing of the illegals outside the country.
Yeah, we're
through
setting up
the
those centers.
app that they have, and then they ship them up here.
Right.
A lot of times they fly them up at our expense.
Yeah, exactly.
And so none of this really is brought out into the public.
No.
Because the bill is the bill, and nobody reads the bill.
No, they just say we try to get a bill passed when we first when we first took our oath. And I saw an interview with Tim Walz earlier this week saying the exact same line. The interviewer asks him, "Okay, so what is your plan to fix the problem?" He's like, "Well, we tried to fix the problem day one." Harris, when she took the oath of office, she said that she wanted this bill to be passed by Congress. And Bret Baier points out, you guys controlled the presidency, the House, and the Senate, okay? 6 Democrats voted no in the Senate on this, so it wasn't popular.
No, it wasn't popular. And everybody knows it wasn't popular, and that's why they don't bring it up, which to me is like counterproductive.
Yeah.
Even Republicans don't bring this up, which really they should.
Yeah.
If anything, I'd love to have a show on it where, everybody starts talking about the bill in detail.
Yeah.
Put it right up on the screen so people can see it,
Yeah,
but they don't do that.
No. And then she refers to a second bill that would have allowed 1.8 million illegal aliens per year into the country.
Right.
And this is the bill that they keep blaming Trump for shooting down.
Killing.
And I just want to explain to the viewers for a quick second how this bill works. Basically, it would have let in 5,000 illegal aliens into the country per day until the administration could technically act. And the reason Trump told Congress, lobbied for Congress not to pass this bill, was simply because we have laws in the books that say no one can enter illegally. And if they do, the presidency has the power through executive order to stop this. And so by signing this into law, it would have actually allowed for 5,000 illegal aliens to come into the country per day before the presidency could act. And so that's why they shot this bill down.
Exactly. And again, the same thing. Why don't they bring up like the law and say, this is what the law states.
Right.
And this is what you want to do. You know what I mean? It's like, so it's actually against the law to do what you want to do.
Right. They want to change the law.
Yes.
So that they're being legal.
That's right. They want to give amnesty to all of them, and then they want to give citizenship to those who come in the future.
Right.
So to fast track, basically, that's what it's called, fast track them.
So here's another clip. This is Bret explaining that it was a policy decision in the early parts of her administration to rescind the 90-plus executive orders that likely would have prevented deaths caused by illegal aliens. Remember Lake and Riley?
Yeah.
And Biden botched her name up at the State of the Union.
Yeah.
And others, young women like her that were raped and then killed because people were allowed into this country who would have not been allowed had they not rescinded these orders.
Jocelyn Nungary, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. This is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Bret,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur.
Wow. That's just such gobbledygook. It's all lies and twisting of the actual truth.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to approach the topic. So instead, they turn around, well, if they just passed the bill.
Right.
And what about the 2.5 years prior to the bill?
Exactly, yeah.
That's really what the problem was. And she won't take any responsibility for it. And I think she would have done herself a lot of good if she said, that was a mistake, you know?
Yeah.
And then say, but I'm going to change that.
Yeah, I think you're right because...
Blame Biden. Throw Biden under the bus.
Exactly.
Dummy.
Her base is still going to vote for her.
Yeah.
So she won't lose them if she talks about the border.
Right.
And so she might actually gain some support from people who are in the middle or who just aren't going to vote this year because they don't like either candidate.
Exactly.
But she's too prideful to do that because, well, one, she doesn't like those policies that would save people, and two, she can't admit that she's wrong.
Yeah, no, she can't admit she's wrong. And also, that would put her in a position to actually have to change something.
Yeah.
And so all of this talk that they do now, just double talk.
Right, exactly.
When they get in office, nothing's going to change.
No.
When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
I'm just going to pause it there real quick. She says we're going to follow the law.
Yeah, where's the law?
Well, that's the thing. Remember we were talking about earlier about how they changed the law and
Yeah.
so they would let 5,000 illegals in a day. I think she was very careful with what she said there simply because she could technically follow the law if they change the law.
Yeah.
So she's not saying, okay, I don't support these things that I said 5 years ago, which she obviously does because she doesn't disavow them. She simply says, I will follow the law.
Exactly. Yeah. In other words, she's not talking about what was.
Right.
She's talking about what will be.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
Unburdened by what has been.
Exactly.
We're going to talk about what I'll do. I will follow the law.
Yeah, when they change the
Unbelievable.
law.
What double talk.
Let's continue.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
Again, same thing there. He asks her very specifically, Tim Walz signs this into law. He obviously supports it because he signed it. Do you support it, and will you enforce that in your administration? And her response again is, we will adhere to federal law. Okay, so you will change federal law, in other words.
Yeah, we're going to adhere to the law that we will make.
Exactly, yes.
So decriminalizing border crossings, like you said in 2019.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president.
So these are evolutions that you've had.
But let's be very clear. I'm the only person who's running for president who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations, from the Sinaloa cartel to the Guadalajara cartel, to people who have trafficked in guns, drugs, and human beings. I have spent a significant part of my career going after people who present a threat to the safety of the American people and cross our border with the intent of doing us harm and cross our border illegally. And I will do that work as vice president. I take that work quite seriously.
You'll do that work as vice president? Your term's almost up.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, she says, I'll do that work as vice president.
Yeah.
Well, she hasn't. Biden gave her the title borders are. People can deny it. It's in official White House transcripts.
Yeah.
So turn to those. But she says she'll do that as vice president. She didn't do it as vice president, so why would she change as president?
She's not going to.
No. And
nothing's going to change.
That's the point. All right, so this is the last clip we have here. I think, no, second to last. This was another good clip here.
He's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So before he continues, I watched a couple compilations of Trump saying the enemy within, and he defines it as Marxists and communists.
Yes.
And I'm sure you know, back in the 60s and the 50s, our government actually went after communists in this nation because they posed a threat to this country.
Absolutely.
It wouldn't be anything new.
No, it would be nothing new. And in other words, see, she can't own that because she is Marxist.
Right.
She's on that pathway already.
Yes.
And so what she's trying to do is divert it and saying he's going after the people. He never meant he's going after the people. What, going to go after the people, elect them? Because the majority are going to elect him.
Right.
Give me a break.
And again, he's been president before.
Yeah, and he didn't go after his own people.
No.
Now, this time, hopefully, he will go after the deep state.
Yeah.
And those who have committed crimes and high treason and anything else.
Yeah, people who have actually committed crimes.
Yes.
There was a story out, I think yesterday, of this elderly grandfather who stood outside this abortion mill and protested. And the worst thing he did was sit in front of the door and pray and beg women not to go in and kill their kids. And the Biden administration's throwing that guy into prison for 6 months in one of the most notorious prisons in the country.
Yeah. Imagine.
It's terrible.
But see, they don't care.
No.
Because the outcry is from the right, and the news media buries the outcry from the right.
Yeah.
So the only people that carry it are places like Fox News, OEN.
Yeah.
And, the rest of the country doesn't watch it, doesn't pay attention.
Right. Most people don't see it.
So they get away with putting this guy in prison for doing something like trying to protect the life of an innocent person.
Right.
A baby. And, really the majority of the country doesn't even know about it.
No.
So,
Bret, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you.
That was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
I'm going to pause there real quick. So she talks about him wanting to put people in prison who have protested peacefully.
Yes.
What does that remind you of?
Yeah.
January 6th.
January 6th.
And
exactly.
He says, peacefully go to the Capitol and protest.
Peacefully and patriotically.
And patriotically, yes, that's right. If you're going to go peacefully and patriotically. Who dies? One person, Ashley Babbitt.
That's right.
A Trump supporter.
Yeah.
Killed by a trigger-happy cop.
Yep.
That's it.
And she uses the technique of, you and I both know.
Yes, a lot.
You and I both know. And he's like, no, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. And I think people need to catch that.
Yeah.
Because that's a technique in order to basically psychologically, people think, oh, well, he agrees with her.
Right.
Or he knows that too.
Yeah,
but it's
just
not
because
true.
she says it. Yeah. Yeah, you'll notice in conversations, when people are starting to mess up and they don't know what to say, they'll repeat phrases or they'll say something like that. You and I both know that this is right. And you're just standing there not saying anything, but people watching, like you said, assume, okay,
They're
he
hearing
knows
it.
too because she says that.
Yep.
And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward book that way, yes. Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President.
but
You call
let's not
Donald
diminish
Trump.
the significance of that.
You call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now
He's
he
unstable.
is unstable.
He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You
and
told
we
many
should all be
interviewers.
concerned.
This part's great because he gives her exactly what she wants. You can see she's like, yeah, he's unstable. He's crazy. And he keeps feeding her. It's like when you get a person who doesn't like somebody and you just say one thing. Like you've talked about this before. You say that one thing and they just get triggered.
They're off.
He does it there with her. And he's like, he just keeps going. And she just keeps playing the game. And her response here is great.
You
And
told
we
many
should all be
interviewers
concerned.
that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people. Joe Biden.
So for those listening, you couldn't see her face there, but he asks the question. He talks about Trump, he gets her going, and then he asks, okay, so when did you realize Joe Biden is totally incapable of being president? And her face is like,
I'm caught.
she has nothing to say because she was not expecting it.
No.
She was totally caught off guard there.
Concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And
but
Donald Trump
But
is.
you talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George
is,
Clooney said
and
within a
if
few
you
minutes of
watch
talking to President
Donald
Biden at a
Trump-
fundraiser that he thought this was not the same
Brett,
Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years.
So she keeps saying Biden's not on the ballot. And the reason he's not on the ballot is because he's senile.
Yeah.
So this is a perfectly legitimate question. Okay, Biden's not on the ballot because he's senile. When did you realize he was senile? She has no answer because either way she answers, she loses.
She loses. So she defers the question.
Exactly.
And starts talking about something else. Donald Trump.
Always Donald Trump.
She mentioned Donald Trump's name more than anything through the
yeah.
entire interview.
I was thinking about it. If you listen to a press briefing by Karine Jean-Pierre, whenever she's asked a question that's really important, she always says, Donald Trump did this in his previous administration, and that's why we're dealing with this problem now.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't watch a lot of Donald Trump's press secretaries because I was younger back then and not as involved in politics, but I don't think that they responded this way. The only way she responds to tough questions is by saying Donald Trump did this and this is his fault.
The Trump administration never brought up Obama.
Right.
They never brought up previous administration.
They would put
at
forward
all.
policy that they would fix or
That's it.
A solution to a problem, not, okay, the predecessor did this, not, hey, we're going to try working on this problem with this solution.
Here they are 3.5 years in, and they're
Yeah.
still blaming Donald Trump. And they had the House, the Senate, the
Yeah.
presidency, and they did nothing.
Right.
You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again, including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact. That is a fact.
Yeah, she doesn't have much substance there at all.
No, there's nothing there. You just have to let it go. What else can she say? You know, anything to try to impugn Trump to any degree. That's what she's going to use. And besides, all those other people, politically, they were against Trump. They were plants.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the reason why Trump fired him. And so they're mad because they got fired.
Right.
All the better.
Or with the case of Mark Milley, I believe it is, he just signed onto a nice book deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
There's incentive there for him to make money off of these stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, I think he gets paid from, what is it, CNN, MSNBC, one of them.
Is he a contributor?
Yeah, he's a paid kind of contributor.
I don't have this ending clip. I'll put it in when I edit. But at the very end, Bret Baier is asking her questions, and he talks about it, which I do have the other clip, where he says 4 people are waving him like, hey, you got to wrap this up. It's over.
I hope you got to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump. There are a lot of things.
There's more to say. I have much more
there
to
are
say,
a lot of things that people want to learn about you and your policies, and that's why we invited you
I invite everyone
here.
to go to KamalaHarris.com.
Madam Vice President,
And
they're giving me a hard rap
Well,
here.
I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
It's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But here's this clip of him afterward explaining how the interview ended.
Dana, you've been on the other side. You've been on the rapper as a press secretary interviewing a president. And, I'm talking like 4 people waving their hands like it's got to stop. So, Martha, I had to dismount there at the end. There's so many things, and she maybe should do more of these.
I love that at the end. She maybe should do more of these.
Yeah, I think maybe she should. I think it'd be great. A couple of more times.
Yeah, maybe Joe Rogan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she would get crushed just by herself in a 3-hour interview.
The scary part about all of this is that people can literally close their eyes and their ears to her answers and her facial expressions and her obvious, deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
And yet say, well, I'm still going to vote for her.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of it is because she's a woman.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think a lot of it is that. Well, because she's a woman.
Yeah.
She's not Trump. And she's a woman.
Yeah.
So, we just got to pray.
Yeah. I was watching an interview, not an interview. It was a podcast by some liberal guy, and he had a bunch of clips of her, pretty much the same ones I'm showing here. And he was like, yeah, look at her go. She's doing so awesome. And I'm thinking to myself, I hope if Trump did that badly in an interview, I wouldn't say that because you should be objective about it. And I think I would be like, he screwed up. Okay. Like the debate, it was a tie. He didn't do great. He could have done better, although he landed a few things and she did okay as well. Here, going into this, I didn't think she would do as badly as she did. I thought she'd be more polished like she was in her debate, where we were expecting worse. We didn't get anything good, but it didn't look bad for her because we set the bar so low. Yeah. Here, the bar was already set low, but she just
absolutely. I mean, he didn't ask her anything that really shouldn't have been asked.
Yeah.
I think he was pretty fair in the way he handled it too. And she just kept trying to talk over him with her talking points, trying to get the talking points on the air.
Yeah.
That's really what it was all about.
Yeah, it was a disastrous debate for her. And, we'll see what happens come election time.
It's coming. A couple of weeks.
And with that, let's get to Ask the Pastor.
We have to use Scripture against the enemy in order to get him to flee. You got to stick with the Word, though. You can't hit him with anything else. It's got to be the Word of God.
All right, so Pastor Mike, today's question is, should there be a firm separation between church and state? And why? If so, why or why not?
Well, absolutely. There should be a firm separation between church and state. And I think the way that this has been misconstrued over the years, it's been twisted.
Okay.
In other words, there should be a dividing wall that the state should not be able to interfere in the church's business. The state has no right to impede the church in any way, shape, or form. And that is actually the way it was meant originally when that phrase was first used, separation of church and state. And this was Thomas Jefferson. Okay. Now, the interesting part of this is there's some things I didn't realize either. Thomas Jefferson received a letter from the Baptist Association in Connecticut. And the letter was very nice. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but they're basically thanking him for his election, realizing that, 30 years that he's been in politics, that he's done well. And it seems like, God has put him in this office for this time and for this season. And I'm going to read this. But our hopes are strong that the sentiment of our beloved president, which have had such genial effect already, like the radiant beams of the sun, will shine and prevail through all these states and all the world, till hierarchy and tyranny be destroyed from the earth. So, sir, when we reflect on your past services and see a glow of philanthropy and goodwill shining forth in a course of more than 30 years, we have reason to believe that America's God has raised you up to fill the chair of state out of that goodwill which he bears to the millions which you preside over. May God strengthen you for your arduous task ahead, and wish you wealth and importance, and so on and so forth. Sincerely, signed on behalf of Neil Dodge for the Baptist Convention. Interesting. All that did was just share their sentiments of good wishes and hope that basically he would follow the path that God laid out for him.
Yeah.
Now, here's the interesting part. Jefferson decides to respond to this letter. And his response, written to the Baptist Association, was mainly meant to acknowledge the letter that they sent him. Now, here's the part that was taken out of context, and this is the part that has been changed and turned around. He says this: believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions. I contemplate with sovereign reverence that the act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state, adhering to this expression of the supreme will of the nation in behalf of the rights of conscience. I shall see with sincere satisfaction the progress of those sentiments which tend to restore to man all his natural rights, convinced he has no natural right in opposition to his social duties. In other words, this wall was established to keep the government out of the church's business.
Not the other way around.
Not the other way around.
Okay.
But media has been so corrupted, especially in the past 50 years, that they have turned it around and coined the phrase. And let's face it, the average American listens to what they hear, but never research it for themselves. To me, they're really uninformed.
Yeah.
Or ill-informed, ignorant. I don't know which way you want to put it.
Right.
But for me, if I hear something and it kind of rings a little, well, maybe, I want to go check it out. I want to see what it actually has to say, like a bill or something that the Senate or Congress is trying to get through.
Right.
And they talk about it, they give it such grandiose names.
Yeah.
And then underneath, it's like just the opposite of the name.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And so this letter was taken out of context and turned around just the opposite of what it meant. So should there be a wall? Absolutely, there should be a wall. And the wall should be to protect the church from the government's intervention. So what we have today, unfortunately, is that the church has lost its credibility. And I think a lot of that is the church's fault because we haven't stood up, haven't been vocal enough, especially pulpits. They're pretty quiet, like crickets, They don't want to talk about politics or anything else. But yet, if we research some of I've been trying to get a copy of these sermons, but they're out there, and I've read some over the years. Sermons that were written in the late 1700s, early 1800s, especially here in New England, because this is where it all started.
Yeah.
And you read the sermons and you listen and you go, oh my God, these guys spoke about politics all the time.
Really?
Yes, and they did it because they felt this was what they were compelled to do. And I find all through Scripture the same thing. I mean, we have men like John the Baptist who went and spoke to Herod. He's the king.
Right.
He was in charge. He's the man, baby. Of course, he lost his head over it, but, he was willing to stand out among the crowd and tell him, look, this is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. Bang. And I think that's what's really happened. The church has been too silent. And now that factions are arising within the church, men and women a little more vocal, we're getting media pushback. And they're basically calling us the crazies, us the fanatics.
Right.
We're the troublemakers, and we're the ones that are going to cause riots, and we're the ones that are going to, cause damage and so on and so forth. So, yes, we need to have a wall of separation, but it needs to be built from the ground up once again, and it starts with a grassroots effort right in the church. Build its way up.
Yeah.
People from within the church going into the public sector, getting involved in local politics, get involved in statewide politics, get involved in national politics.
Right.
But more importantly, get involved in all the other things like education of our children, and how the government interferes
Right.
in the way a parent should raise his child.
I think you had an excellent point there with what you said about
Of course I did.
Of course you did. About pastors and preachers being quiet because they are afraid to speak about political things. But I would say to that, and the point you made there is we're applying eternal principles to time and space. And what I mean by that is we live in time and space. I said like Kamala Harris there. We live in time and space. And so we're going to live through different circumstances like John the Baptist did with Herod and his wife, and how he shouldn't have been married to her, and John the Baptist called that out. So we live in circumstances not exactly like that, but we deal with our own things that we should call out as pastors and preachers and even people within the church. We should notice that we live in a time like they did then. And so we have a responsibility to apply these eternal principles found in the Bible and from God to the things and circumstances going on in our lives.
Absolutely. Because only then can we be unburdened by what has been. Only then are we able to look forward and really begin to take on, the task that God has called us to this day.
Right.
Isn't that important?
No.
Then we're unburdened by what has been. That happens when we put feet to our faith and we begin to stand in the gap and speak for those who can't speak for themselves, are too young to speak for themselves, or unable to speak for themselves.
Right.
That's when the difference will start to be.
Well, thank you for joining us. And if you have your own questions, you can email us at mike@thecalopodcast.com, or you can leave your comments in the comment section below, and we'll get back to you next week.